see. Chris made me the poster child this morning.
Oh, yeah, yeah,
Like I didn't expect that to come.
yeah.
He took it off the Facebook page, and I don't remember.
Oh, yeah. See,
But
I'll
there was
probably
one
have
this
to strike
morning
it
that
by
came.
his
Oh,
other
I
story.
didn't-
Actually, not this one, probably early
Yeah.
afternoon.
To which I read the story and I wrote to John, and I said, John, I said, he mentions having a Stradivarius cello. I said, if he did, it's not real. I said, because it would be worth more than $10. So.
Yeah, I don't think
I didn't get it.
so. Be nice.
Sure,
You'd
but
be a
if it says
millionaire.
Stradivarius on the inside, it's definitely not Stradivarius, so.
Thanks, Mike.
I'm just gonna look at my,
Was Ellen gonna zoom in?
Yeah, I'm trying to get her in right now. I did let her know she can, she's gonna join via the live stream. Never mind.
Oh. Perfect. Okay, so we can call this meeting to order. First item on the agenda is public comment. If anyone here wants to make a public comment about anything?
Well,
Yeah, go
Ryan,
ahead.
we got 29 Glenn. I only showed up to look at how much snow I've got on the roof of my building. Sort of like I spoke a little bit at the council meeting when we first brought this up, and I'm here for the same reason, just to see where this is going, get an idea. And having had a building downtown for 24 years, I'm familiar with what SHPO and grants and all that stuff was, so if you want to know some firsthand experience, I was involved, again, that was a long time ago.
Unknown caller.
I have some experience with this and try to make an old quasi-historic building economically viable. So I'm here to provide input if needed.
Well, and please join in if you
Thank you.
would like to speak. All right, so the next item is approval for the minutes of January 2025. We have a motion to approve those minutes.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Next, Gateway Law. And we have to turn it over to you guys.
Let's just stand over.
Right at the end of the table.
Okay, I'll start.
I guess I did have one thing before you
Sure.
start. It's just the, if you at some point can go over your timeline.
Yes.
Just so we can, I know we're in very preliminary stages. I think myself and there's maybe one other member who was here prior to this, and so everyone else is sort of fresh.
Okay.
So just sort of give everyone time to process everything and come up with questions and
Okay.
comments.
Yeah, so that's a great, so hi everyone, I'm Lindsay Hogmerick, I'm an attorney with Phillips Lytle, and we're here representing the project sponsor, who I'll just call STEL. It's the Southern Tier Environments for Living, a new LLC, but just refer to them as STEL. And so Stephen Auld is here, also from the project sponsor team. We have Robin, the project engineer, so we're here to answer any questions. But I wanted to just kind of go through a little bit of the history here. This project has been through a fulsome review by the city for about a 2-year planning review was done. Initial applications were submitted in about May, June of 2018. Went through about a 2-year process with the city. Multiple submittals were submitted, lots of comments, lots of project changes as a result of this fulsome review. And then in June of 2020, the project did receive its final approval from the Planning Commission, both a negative declaration and a final site plan approval. So since that time, there haven't been any changes to the project itself. The issue is that this project, like what happened to many others, is that because of COVID, it lost its investor. So it had to rethink financing for this project, and that has just taken time. And Stephen is here if you have any more specific questions on that process, you can certainly answer them. But really, that's been the biggest issue. We are getting close though, that's why we're back here before you. There were a couple of extensions of the site plan approval, but finally in June of 2023, that last one lapsed. And so that's why we are here before you with a new application, but of an old project that's been approved and hasn't changed. So while, yes, we're at the beginning stages, we hope we're not at the beginning stages. And we really are hopeful that we can work through this on a much quicker basis. So I will say we are at the final stages with both the New York State Housing Finance Agency, the County of Chautauqua Industrial Development Agency, the New York State Empire State Development. Those are all funding sources. We're nearing the end stages of getting that funding in place so that the project can actually start moving forward for we redevelop it. I will also note that there is a funding application due at the end of March for a secondary source, and if we don't have final approvals in place for that round of applications, we will not be eligible to apply for another whole year. So we are coming to you sort of with our hands between our knees saying, please, work with us. We want to make sure financing, like I said, has been a challenge here, and a lot of time, a lot of energy has gone into keeping this project alive. So we want to make sure we can do what we can to keep that on track. So that brings us to why we're here today, which is to seek site plan approval, but it's really a reapproval of the project that's already been before you.
Do you want questions as you're going along, or?
Whatever you want. I was gonna do a high-level overview of the project, but if you.
Well, I just had a question in regards to the timing that you had mentioned.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, you said that you're at a drop dead timeline of when? And does
Yes.
it end up, what is that?
It's the end of March.
End of March.
March 31?
It's like the third week, I believe.
And what do you need to provide that funder?
We need to show that we have all required zoning approvals in place.
Zoning and site plan
Zoning.
approvals?
Right,
Correct.
it's the
That
federal.
is quite a big ask.
It's the federal home loan bank, New York State federal,
Okay.
home loan
Yeah.
bank of New York, that they have application rounds once per year. And these are not requirements of a project, but they get you a significant amount of points. And without these points, we're not likely to have a successful application, and then we have another year before we could ask you for the money again. And it's only $2 million, but it is $2 million.
Sure.
So just as a high-level overview of the project, and then I do have the engineer and Steven here who can answer if you have any more specific questions as you get into the site plans. But the project itself is the adaptive reuse of the existing Gateway Center building, which I'm sure you're all very familiar with. And the project will provide multifamily affordable and supportive housing. So through STEL's efforts, this building has now been listed as eligible for listing on the state and national register for historic places. So all the efforts that they've put in thus far and will continue to do are what will allow the preservation of this important local historic landmark. And so they're not demolishing it, they're adaptively reusing this important structure. In total, there'll be 110 units in a makeup of studio 1, 2, and 3 bedroom apartments. 56 of those units will be supported by funding from the New York Empire State Supportive Housing Initiative, so that's reserved for persons with special needs. And then the other remaining 54 units will be provided for low to moderate income residents. The site itself will have a number of improvements. So there'll be a demolition of some of the ancillary buildings, smaller structures that exist on site, as well as 2 residential structures at 53 and 54 Water Street. There'll be a new construction of a playground area, expansion of green space, walkways, picnic areas, and overall, this project is meant to complement the city's highly successful Chattahoochee River Walk by incorporating green space and pedestrian amenities right along the river's edge on this site. And there will also be improvements to the parking area for a total of 148 spaces, and site access will continue on Water Street at the same existing driveway connection. There will also be a number of support services provided to residents as part of the project: care management, employment services, counseling. The project does require 2 area variances. We will be before the ZBA at their next meeting for those 2 variances. Again, the project itself has not changed. Those variances themselves, the request there has not changed. And I will note, Ellen wanted me to make it clear, we have not yet met with planning staff given this March deadline and the timeline here, we wanted to meet with this commission first to get any feedback you have. We're then gonna have our meeting with planning staff, take hopefully any comments that come out of both of these meetings, incorporate them, present them if there are any project changes, present them to you in March with your next meeting, March 18th, where we'll hopefully receive final approval. That's our timeline, that's what we're looking for, and that's why we're here today and happy to answer any questions you might have.
Can you go over some of the on-site services? I remember there was gonna be on-site help and support. I can't remember all the specific organizations.
Yeah, do you wanna?
Well, right now, there exists, the Mental Health Association is on the ground floor, along with Community Helping Hands. Community Helping Hands will remain 50% owner of the building along with Stell. Community Helping Hands has a thrift shop and furniture warehouse for people that are homeless and they need furniture. Then there's St. Susan's Kitchen, which they have an option on another piece of property, but so we don't know for sure they're gonna stay, but that's an amenity right now. And then Stell and the YWCA, with the YWCA serves women with children, mostly women with children who are recovering from substance abuse. And so the YWCA will be providing services to the population of women with children. And then Stell, we provide services to people with mental illness. And we'll have, both the YWCA and Stell will have offices on site.
So the MHA, they're still there.
The MHA is definitely going to still be there, right?
So I know that there's been a lot of work gone into this over the years, both by city staff and by developers, the legal counsel and the architects. I do have a question in regards to, seeker. And where do you see, how do you see wading through seeker now that there has been, I would say, a substantial change in the project in the financing stack because of the involved agencies?
Yeah, I do know where all of the agencies that are in it now, involved agencies at that same time.
I think the only new one is Federal Home Loan Bank.
Yeah, so, and that would be separate,
There will be ESD,
which I believe,
ESD, and then also,
IDA.
IDA, and also probably County of Chautauqua, because I believe this will be a 239 review.
yeah, under seeker that we wouldn't necessarily need to be an involved agency, but it might have to be further down.
It'll probably be a county referral under 239.
I mean, as far as we're concerned, the overall project itself has not changed.
Yeah,
It
the
impacts the
physical
seeker
aspects of the
determination.
project
Correct.
haven't changed, but there have been a number of changes in regards to, the capital stack going into it and some other items. So I'm just wondering and maybe this is a technical question for staff and maybe STEP and maybe city legal counsel would be, how does the commission handle, the seeker? I know that the seeker does not expire,
Right.
but there have been some substantial changes in the
Yeah.
project that may warrant either amendment or rescinding of the neg deck, and then redoing the seeker.
I think each of those agencies could do their own, they could adopt the planning commission's seeker determination.
Sorry to jump in.
No.
I think a lot of that will also be further crystallized once staff does their review of the site plan application and the zoning variance request. So it's kind of hold that thought and we will get answers for you.
Yeah, because it has been determined to be a type 1 action, which
Yes.
requires a coordinator review.
Yeah. So we're not gonna have any conclusive answers today, but we will definitely have those before the project is voted on.
And we can certainly, discuss those further. It's just, I do believe in ESD, if they were not an involved agency last time around, they would do their own review and they could adopt what this planning commission did and say, we adopt the seeker review, the seeker determination that the planning commission did. The planning commission itself would not have to rescind or redo, or you wouldn't have to redo seeker, because from your purposes, the project itself is not
And
changed.
again, that would be more dependent upon, city's legal counsel.
Absolutely, yeah.
And happy
So,
to have that
yeah.
discussion as well.
And that's not something that we'll have as part of today's discussion, so, yeah.
Anyone else have any?
So, project timeline, I know I was in a meeting with a few of you maybe a month or so ago, and there was talk about maybe starting this fall. Is that still kind of on track, I hope?
Starting last summer we went to the Housing Finance Agency. We've been back and forth with them over what they call site suitability, which is the first step in getting on their calendar to close. We passed site suitability in July. They gave us an email saying that no further action is needed with respect to site suitability. And then I immediately said, okay, well, can we submit an application now? You know, because that's the next step, is to submit the full application for the low-income housing tax credits. And I was told, well, there's two kinds of tax credits, 4% and 9%, and the 9% is competitive. And they came out with a 9% round right around that time, and they said, I can't even talk to you about it till after the 9% round is over. 9% round was done in about November, and then he said, I can't talk to you about it until we get our year-end closings done. And then the second week in January, had a meeting with him, and he said, we'll close with you in the first quarter of 2026. But he did give us an invitation to apply, which was the next step. So now we officially are invited to apply, and we can submit the application anytime. It's just they're not gonna close with us until this time next year.
So, and just so the planning commission knows, the city has a large culvert project that's gonna be going on in this area as well. I'm not too sure the plans. So this is the existing culvert right here. We're gonna be moving that culvert from here. The plan currently is to then move it over against this. That's the middle.
Sinkhole right there
Yes.
now.
What's your timeline? What's the city's timeline?
2026.
Okay.
So spring, summer of 2026 is when we get started. We have a contract with New York State in place, and now it's just a matter of, really the first work is getting a new easement with the property owner.
Okay.
So
Stephen, is the brownfields completed?
No, well, we're accepted into the ground
Yeah.
cleanup program, but we haven't done any remediation work.
Okay.
and maybe that's the question I was asking, like, when will that work start? Is that still anticipated for fall, or is that once?
No, that would be
Spring?
when everything else starts, everything would start at the same time.
Okay.
The exception being, there's something called the slab depressurization system. That's gonna go in as soon as possible, you know, because it's considered to be an imminent threat. So the vapors coming up are considered to be an imminent threat. So we're gonna put in the sub-slab depressurization system probably in the next couple of months.
That's very similar to what was done with the Jamestown Brewing Building. They had put in a sub-slab depressurization system also. Very, very simple process. When this was approved, and I'm just kind of I was trying to go back as far over the minutes of the prior commission meetings to try to get as much information as I could on it. It looked like there was a discussion of mitigation to avoid having to go through a full EIS for the project, and I believe that what was discussed and what is actually in the minutes of planning commission was, you know, a discussion and nothing written, but it looked like it was a verbal intent to set aside, I believe, $350,000 for off-site demolition of lighted housing that was supposed to be determined by both the city and a county entity. Because originally there was a full IS that was actually requested by the planning commission at that time. And then through conversation and with staff, apparently there was a negotiation to allow for that to occur, not to proceed with a full EIS, which would have been both very costly and very time consuming. So I'm wondering, you know, if that is also part of this new application, or if we are back to, you know, square one and, with no negotiation for potential off-site mediation.
Steve, was that ever like a condition of?
It was not a
approval?
condition of
Okay.
approval, but it was verbal
Okay.
by both the legal counsel for Stell, and I believe also Stell itself.
Right, and I think there was some writings exchanged, but nothing like by the way of a contract or an agreement. But, we did put down some terms in writing about $350,000 for demolition, and was involving, the Chicago County Land Bank was going to be
Okay.
part of that. You know, they were gonna identify the property that should be demolished.
And I would anticipate that if this is the same project coming back before Planning Commission, that also would be part and parcel of the project. And, you know, perhaps this time going through, Planning Commission may desire to make that a condition of the approval, that is either in writing it within the approval or as a separate document.
I'm happy to make sure that we review that internally, Greg, to see what had been exchanged before. The players have changed internally, so in terms of
Exactly,
our,
but the project.
in terms of our institutional knowledge of how that played out, yeah,
The
we'll
project
get
has
up
not
to speed
changed,
with
so
that.
that's,
I do remember, I remember.
and I believe, yeah, it was you that brought that up, Mike.
They never got as far as identifying target properties to demolish.
Yeah,
Well,
that would
everything's
be
sort of shut down.
premature at this point to do that. You know, it's, the city's needs are gonna change between now and when that money's available.
Correct. But, and then maybe not identifying specifically, but just, you know, putting down to black and white, you know, intents.
I remember seeing a document with, signature lines for, the city, Stell, and the Chicago County Land Bank. It was never executed, but I saw something prepared, so maybe I could dig through
And
my
maybe
files.
that's something that Ellen
Yeah.
can take a look at. And
We can do.
so I think that everybody would benefit, the project, the community, everybody would benefit from having it in place.
Would certainly give us some context
Yeah.
of what we should have.
Those are my initial questions right now. I'm sure that as we go forward, I'll probably have more questions that I'll forward through Ellen and city staff and
Any questions on the site plan itself, on the layout, the design?
really don't have,
Okay.
you know, it's difficult, you know, to go by the.
Yeah, it would be nice to have the presentation back again, like on, one of the screens or something, so we can go through it.
Well, I mean, we have,
Oh, you
little
do?
plans of
I
the
have
site
our
plan.
site boards, and I apologize, I wasn't the GPI staff that was down here last time.
But yeah, if you would like to go through them, just so,
Do a little-
and then, is it okay with you, because we will all have questions, and typically we will send them through Ellen.
Absolutely.
And then she can be the point of contact, and as we go forward.
Yeah, and to the extent any of them are available before we meet with Ellen and her team, we'll discuss them there.
Well, and that's why
and-
we like to do
Yeah,
it,
and
so
then,
we
and then
can-
certainly if there any come up afterwards, absolutely.
All right.
You want to hold it?
No, but you're relatively new to this too, right?
Oh, yeah.
Jessica, that was the engineer that was working on this before, I went to the town of Amherst in 2020, I believe it was, so she would know it was cold. But again, I don't know if you guys can see this well enough, but do you have the ability to have on screens?
Yeah, certainly for,
In here?
yes, yep. But if not this
Next
meeting, the
time.
next meeting, once everything.
Next meeting or even a special meeting.
Yeah, we can do that, yeah.
We would, if you're, if you would entertain a special meeting, we
Absolutely,
would greatly
yeah.
appreciate that.
Yeah, it would very much help, so.
I think it would help all of us to understand a little bit more, you know, even though I've seen some of the site plans from the initial package, just to refresh everybody's memory, and for those that are new on the commission, I think it would be,
I have a small set here too, if you guys wanted to have them closer to you, but this is the site plan. This is gonna show the parking layouts, the dimensions of any paths for our transformers, generators, things like that. But this is also gonna showcase the trail, that walking trail that's gonna be part of the river system. So in the green space, which is priority nowadays, it really is. So in the next plan, this is actually a demolition plan showing what, from the existing, what was gonna be removed. The hatchwork should be, let's most of the blacktop in here is in rough shape. I've never been down to the site besides when it was covered in snow, so I can't tell you for sure, but.
Don't drive around that.
Especially don't drive in the big hole, it's.
Hummer,
part of it.
go ahead.
Yeah, that's a, I have to bring a Wrangler for that tour, but, and actually, strangely enough, GPI is the contract holder for doing the drawings for the tunnel and easement map, so, we're gonna coordinate between, it's actually being taken care of by my downtown office for the storm culvert, and my office, the airport more is gonna coordinate more, because with their realignment, some of our drainage connections here are either gonna have to change or be adjusted a little bit based on that new alignment, so. We've got drainage that is actually gonna either tie right into the new culvert system, or because of some of the changes here and that new outlet, I'm gonna have to rework some of the actual, which direction the piping's going in, but the ultimate discharge point is not gonna change. Everything's going right to the river, and because of the river size, we don't actually have to have detention of any sort. Sanitary sewer is coming out front here, and water line is also coming out, but our power source is mainly gonna be, I think it's still coming in from the west side of our lot. So, you know, that's still, we're working on some of those tweaks. So right here, this is grading and drainage. It's really not gonna show you guys too much from how far away you're sitting, but we're trying to maintain as much of the existing grades of the parking lot now, so we don't have to do too much on the outskirts for grading. It's mainly ripping up that blacktop, and we're almost using the same grades as what was there. We're just gonna make them a little bit cleaner and make sure the water.
I just had a quick question, I don't know if you should answer this, or maybe you're the engineer, but the BCP that was approved, is DEC gonna need to sign off on all of the excavation work, prior to that occurring, and how does that play in with the city's DPW removal and relocation of the drainage?
Yeah, is it the whole site?
Yeah,
If
it's
the
the
whole
whole
site's
site.
in the BCP, then, where, do you know where you have, the approvals, the stage you're currently at, the reviewed, the remedial action work plan?
I think you've
Okay.
got a site, you've got a work plan that's all been approved, and it's actually on their website.
Okay, so if that's the case, then absolutely, anything, any work, if it's just the same work, right, if it's just haul and dig, or dig and haul, work, then it doesn't really matter what we're putting back into it or on it. So it might not affect what's been approved, if all you're doing is,
I mean, I don't think it should.
yeah, cause we're still just gonna, dig and haul and,
Yeah.
I mean, for the most part, it's the asphalt removal and.
I just know that sometimes they put in
It's not-
an environmental easement that
Yeah.
that contains certain restrictions.
absolutely, are you doing travel? I'm sorry, I'm like very new to the project,
I
but.
don't think you're going to.
Okay, so we will have an environmental easement on it as well, yeah.
This plan,
I'm sorry. Is that area, that whole general area down along the river, is that considered like a floodplain?
one of our drawings does show the floodplain zone, but our work area is not, my ordinary high water mark is actually shown on the drawings. If you want to step closer, you can see that too, but it's taken into account. This plan is actually one more that we get, a lot of times planning commissions are more interested in the landscaping plan. So, found and determined to make this look nice, especially that area along the river's edge. Adding a significant amount of green space from what was there right now. And, that is not gonna change. Nothing on these drawings has really changed, except for now, it's gonna be the realignment of the culvert and, possibly the connection points for these utility lines. So we have a connection here and a connection here, and if this culvert realignment's coming straight through here, this point will probably stay the same. This point might shift over a little bit to the west and connect in, but ultimately the same discharge point. questions on the plans, anybody wanna get a closer look at them? I can pass along my 11x17s, if you guys wanna take a quick look right there.
There's still security cameras on the outside?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's all. The same.
Just one other comment about, the green space along the river. I know pond leaders and the watershed conservancy and stuff, they're really big on having native species planted along, is there gonna be any coordination with them?
I think that already happened to get us.
I believe it was even discussion of the turtle population that was down there.
Yeah, I remember seeing that in our project notes. I don't know the specifics for that, but it was all taken care of already.
Yeah, personally, I think it's a great project. It's something it's been needed for the city. I mean, it'd just be a matter of giving that in an electronic fashion, having a presentation. And my only concern is getting through the processes with the number of time-related steps that may be necessary, particularly with section 239. That can take up to 30 days. So the sooner that, that we can do this, and the sooner that we can get a determination from legal counsel, if we need to reopen the neg deck, or if we can just amend it and take a look at doing it that way, that would probably be the simplest. Just amend it with any additions or that may be necessary. That would probably be the quickest way if we can do that.
And then if we want additional meeting, we just wanna set that up whenever the staff is.
You let me know when, and yeah.
This will be after staff review.
We're meeting the week of February 20, so next week.
Okay.
We're meeting next week, so
Okay. And then after those discussions happen, and then any adjustments, then we're free to meet.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Anyone else have any questions?
And we do have all the plans. When we originally had the discussions,
Mhm.
Larry asked us not to send everything, because he said, we have so much stuff already for this project, I don't want more paperwork. However, if you want a full set of plans, that's why we just did the site plans and the renderings, we're happy to provide whatever.
Yeah, if you can send them, do you have them already electronically, that you could resend?
I forwarded them electronically with the meeting invite, so you have them. They are available to you digitally. I have the hard copies in my office. I don't have full-size drawings, but in terms of the site plan application, I have the hard copies that they forwarded.
If you want these, I can leave these here with you too.
I think that'd be great.
Yeah, that'd be.
Yeah, if you could.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah. Any other
We'll look
questions for
forward
Matt?
to-
Thank
All
you.
right, so
Appreciate your time.
a couple weeks, and we'll see you again.
Thank you. See you next week. You're supposed to be on vacation, aren't you? Right now?
I'm in between vacations.
I was surprised you were here. Oh, no way.
All right, so next on the agenda is the LPO.
Ah.
All right. And Ellen has helped create a little flow chart for us so that we can work through some of these topics. And so I'm gonna turn this over to Ellen, and we can sort of. work through
you.
this.
Yeah. All right. So I actually wanted to start with just a really quick, I guess, recap of what already is happening in terms of historic preservation in the city. And that is all happening at the national level. Yeah, I'm gonna get you on.
Yeah.
So, currently, we have 3 districts and 7 standalone landmarks that are listed on the National Register of Historic Places as designated by the National Park Service. The districts, I'm so sorry, I failed to put their year of designation on these. My apologies. I think that would have been even bigger context. Apologies. The Downtown Historic District, the Lakeview Avenue Historic District, and the Forest Heights Historic District, those were nominations and applications that were all facilitated through the JRC. The standalone landmarks, I don't have information currently on who submitted the nominations or the applications for those. But suffice it to say, the listed landmarks and the listed districts are designated national historic places. And as I also indicate, their listing enables the landmark, or what are called contributing structures, that are located in the established boundaries of the identified historic district to be eligible for historic tax credits when a property owner is conducting repairs, restoration, or improvement to the structure. And that's primarily to the exterior, not the interior. And so with that, just to qualify what that means for their listing, is that a property owner is not beholden to use the tax credits. But if the credits are a financial incentive for the property owner to make improvements, to do restoration, to make improvements, then the state office, known as SHPO, the State Historic Preservation Office, will inform the property owner of what their requirements and obligations are regarding design or materials as they implement those repairs and restoration or improvements. So what we've been looking at, particularly with the local preservation ordinance, is its distinction on the national level in terms of providing protection. Just for your context, you don't need to participate necessarily. And so one of the biggest things that a local preservation ordinance, or an LPO, is about is the protection of places and areas that are deemed historically significant. And so with the word protection, that's not a far jump that we're also talking about regulations or restrictions. But again, depending on where you fall on the boundary between restrictions and protections is kind of what we need to tease out of what we want to prioritize as the content and the substance of the LPO. So I put together, does anyone need a pen? I've got lots of pens. Tom and Sarah were not able to be here today, but I forwarded this to them, and they were both kind enough to submit their input to me. And so what I wanted to do in real time was, again, start to tease this out as our work session. And so I'm just going to kind of feed us through this. So what kind of structures do you think the LPO should protect? And basically I start with residential structures. So residential structures, all residential structures over 50 years, 75 years, 100 years, yeah. So where might we fall on that? Any knee-jerk reactions?
Well, what percentage of the housing in Jamestown is, over?
We're not gonna qualify it yet, we're not
Okay,
gonna
you
qualify
wanna
it.
qualify it,
Yeah,
okay.
we will qualify it once we have a general position as to where, what we
For
think the
me, I feel
priorities are.
historic has to be substantially older or more unique than the majority of the houses around. So that's why I go to trying to quantify it, to say like, well,
So,
the majority of houses that are in Jamestown, if they're all over 75 years old, then there's really nothing that unique
That
about
brings you
them.
to 1950.
Right,
right.
and which isn't that.
So what I'm hearing you say, Mike, is that your feeling is that we should prioritize the protection of residential structures over 75 years old? That should be their minimum age to qualify as historically significant. Do I hear that right?
I would say even older than that.
Oh, 100?
I would say over 100 years old.
100, okay. All right, so I've got one for 100. Anyone else?
Okay,
For
I've got one. I would say 50 years old, because that is the standard that is utilized for tax credits both at the state and federal level. However, more important than that more important than age, and age is significance to community heritage. That I
Okay,
think
but we're
should-
not gonna qualify it yet. We're
Well, I'm
just
qual- I'm
gonna
qualifying.
we're just gonna quantify it. So did I hear another one for 100 years old as the minimum?
I'll say 100.
Okay, Pete says 100,
I would.
you say 100. All right, we got 5 for 100, we've got 1 for 50. Then I've do have a couple qualifications. Residential structures older than 100 years old that meet a certain location or size or significance to the community. So is it just any 100-year structure or only a 100-year structure if it meets certain criteria?
It needs to, you have to define it.
Okay.
Sure.
So should I transfer these to the qualifications? All right.
I don't, how would size of structure
I
matter
don't
in
know.
that?
I just threw it in there as a consideration.
But then I would also have an asterisk on there that says if the structure is, it could be 40 years old and so unique and significant that it can't be replicated again, or not likely to be replicated again. So that, I would argue, should be, preservation should be prioritized for that also.
So that would
But
suggest that there's gonna be no
Just me.
minimum age of the structure, only other criteria other than age.
I don't see that around here,
I-
so I'm sticking with
I-
100.
You know, excuse me, and what you're saying, look at that house on, what is it, not Palmer, the one that looks like it's made out of ceramic.
Yeah, the Sears house.
Yeah. I don't know when that was built, but it's a one of a kind.
It was in the
It probably
50s.
doesn't fall into a 100-year-old home, but clearly unique. I wouldn't buy it, but, you know, that's my.
See, that to me is the other criteria, or whatever you wanna call it. Significant to the community heritage. So I know this is a preservation thing to keep something that's historic, I guess. But you gotta look at the economics of it. And, I mean, like the arcade building, I mean, seriously, how's that ever gonna happen? Because we can designate it as historical structure or whatever, tax credits. But I don't think there's too many developers or business people would really take something on. I've got other thoughts about how you would incorporate it with other buildings and maybe make the project economically viable. But I think there's a whole economics part to this that should be considered.
So, Peter, do I hear you saying that one of the criteria for it to be considered, for it to have local designation is its economic
Viability.
value?
Viability.
And so,
Because you take like the Fenton Museum, and the city owns that, and they gotta put money into that to keep it propped up.
and do you have a certain sense as to how that viability would be measured?
Not yet. But I think that's something that needs to be considered, because, I love Jamestown because of all the old structures, but obviously slowly but surely, they're not getting fixed up.
All right, so I'm gonna move us on from residential structures to faith-based structures, so churches and the like. So, all faith-based structures should be protected. Anyone, Bueller? No, okay. Any faith-based structure older than 50 years old? Any faith-based structure older than 50 years old as long as it meets certain criteria? None one. Okay. Any faith-based structure older than 75 years old? Okay. Or, Joe, faith-based structure
100.
older than 75 years as long as it meets certain criteria?
I didn't.
Well, that's
I don't
okay.
have that.
That's okay. Okay. All right. Any faith-based structure older than 100 years old? No qualifications, just its age. Just its age, okay. Did I see your hand, Pete?
For the second.
Oh, for the second one, okay. Faith-based structure older than 100 years old as long as it meets certain criteria?
Yeah,
Okay. All right, yeah, okay. Okay, got 2 there. All right, I'm gonna move on to institutional and commercial structures, so that includes any property that nonprofits may own as well. So all institutional or commercial structures, no criteria needed, just the fact that they are an institutional or commercial design building. All institutional, where do we go? Older than 50 years old, no criteria, just the age. And I'm missing a page, of course. Of course I am. Of course I'm missing a page. Sorry about that. So all institutional commercial structures older than 50 years old as long as they meet certain criteria. All institutional commercial structures that are older than 75 years old. No criteria, just the age. Okay, all commercial institutional structures older than 75 years old meeting certain criteria. 100 years old, no criteria. 100 years old as long as it meets certain criteria.
I think it would be much easier if it was straight across the board. 100 years old,
Or
meets all the criteria that are required.
So regardless
for
of
whether
the
it's a
type of
home,
structure.
Right.
Right?
It makes it simple
Yeah.
and
And
more
that's what we're all
understandable.
doing anyhow, it's
Yeah.
just we're
Yeah.
disagreeing on a number of years.
Yeah.
Right? Okay.
Yeah.
So that also goes into manufacturing structures.
Yeah, I did, when I saw manufacturing, I was trying to figure out what the distinction between that and commercial structure.
Sure. Yeah.
So, yeah, cut down the verbiage.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, that's why we're doing this, to see how much distinction, how much of a distinction we need to make for structures or we don't need to make. And so the distinctions are more in the age and then whatever qualifying criteria it might need to meet. So I guess what I'm hearing right now is that the priority is for structures older than 100 years old. That needs to be the minimum age of the structure, as long as it meets certain criteria that we haven't determined yet. So its age is not enough, it's going to have to otherwise meet additional criteria. But 100 years is the minimum age a structure can be considered before being considered for local historic status. Am I hearing that correctly?
Can I?
Yeah,
Because I have to go to a BPU meeting. I came basically because I was curious. I mean, this is obviously gonna eventually come before the city council, so we've had some early discussion and back and forth and trying to figure out. The thing that I'm looking at, like this is a good exercise. I'm gonna bring this with me and I'm gonna go through it and I'll get it to you.
Great.
And I wanna take your time here to go through that, but, you know, Jamestown's, I think it should be, if we're gonna go this route, it should be restrictive. And I say that only because this is an old community. I mean, my house is 100 years old. Every house in my neighborhood is 100 years old. So I mean, in some communities, that would be like ancient. And in our community, I would bet almost half
Status
the
quo.
Average.
Right. And so my point is that, you know, and then when you get into like whether it's churches, whether it's businesses, whether it's other buildings, I think the big picture should be, the historic structure should be something that not just is old, but has some sort of significance to the community, some history to the community, some attachment to the community, and has some not only past value, but future value. And don't want it to be something that becomes difficult or restrictive for owners, developers, or whatever to restore.
So can you say a little
Very
bit
well
more about your different kinds of restrictiveness?
Well, when I say restrictive, I want it to be, it should be special. When you say that's a historic structure, I mean, I look at my house as, like, it's over 100. I don't look at it as a historic structure. It's a beautiful house, it's a nice house, but so are the rest of them on the street. And there are other houses that, you know, it's different with homes versus, you know, did Robert H. Jackson live in my house? Did, you know, there's some Reuben Fenton, did he live there? You know, there are other criteria that could be looked at. Did Lucy live in that house? You know, there's other criteria. It's not so cut and dry, but I think there needs to be some distinction between. It's not always about age, but, you know, Jamestown's kind of unique. It's different than, let's say, a newer suburb, or a new city, or new, where, like I said, 100-year-old building in some places would be like, wow, that thing is, you know, that should be put on a registry, but here in Jamestown, most of the homes or buildings are, you know, in that category. So I think I'm more interested in looking at, like you said, the uniqueness of the structure. You know, what about the Greek Roman Church? That's a unique structure. It's not 100, I don't think it's 100 years old, but,
No, but
It's
it's-
unique.
but it's unique, you know, and so is some of the other ones that have unique sizes and shapes to them. And I'm thinking of houses, I know on Lakeview Avenue, there's one, you know, the one across from the cemetery, it's the brick one, that's a unique structure. You know, I don't know how old it is, but I don't think it's 100, it might be close to it, but
That's on the corner?
they're just past that. It's kind of a more mid-century modern look. But my point is that the criteria, you wanna be careful that we make it so that it's just not everybody, anybody. 100 years old would be anything, you know.
Well, that too, and it could deter investors from coming in and buying up a neighborhood, because it qualifies that neighborhood.
Well, you said they don't have to get you don't have to follow that.
Right.
That's the national level.
Right.
Well, that's if you wanna take advantage of
That's
the,
if
of
you
the
wanna
tax
take advantage,
credits.
Right.
We don't want it to get to a point where someone's going, I'm gonna buy that house because I can't change the roof on it, or I can't put new
But-
windows on it.
But that's what this process or policies would do.
If it's a local
If it's a local
preservation
preservation.
ordinance, then any building, house included in that, would come under, local guidelines for, you know,
Right.
Repair,
And that's why I
maintenance,
want
et
to
cetera.
make
So
sure
it's
that-
gotta be, you gotta be,
We better be very careful that we don't throw the baby out with the
yeah,
bathwater.
and I think you're old enough, Tony, to remember
Not
1993.
100, but.
1993, when the Barrow Associates study was done by the city, that came out, there was a full historic study of you know, prominent structures in the building, including commercial and residential, and that was actually the premise for establishing the 3 historic districts, you know, that have been done so far. It's my understanding that JRC is currently in the process of updating that through Barrow Associates. So I think that could be key as we proceed with this, to identify, okay, you know, maybe it's 75, maybe it's 100 years old, but what is the character of that individual structure, or those 3 structures in a neighborhood that deserve local preservation protection?
So just to kind of break it down a little bit,
Thank you
With-
for.
absolutely.
Thank you, Tony.
The criteria of what makes a structure or an area eligible is really the first thing to be teased out, because then there is certainly the nomination process, but also what's included in maintaining those homes. And so, of course, in a nomination or an application process, that's gonna require permission from the property owner. So it could be there could be a structure that, you know, the whole community loves and considers very significant, but if the property owner is not in alignment with that, then the nomination is really kind of a moot point.
But it
So
doesn't
there's-
say that in here,
As currently written,
In
that's
the,
not the
in the,
case.
in the,
in the draft.
in the draft?
In the draft.
It should be in the draft. Is it in the
For the
draft?
nomination process? No, it doesn't say the
No.
property owner must consent.
Okay.
I didn't read, I didn't,
Okay.
I looked, I didn't see it.
Typically,
I was gonna say, and normally with an
Typically,
Okay.
LPO.
Maybe it's in here and I
is-
just missed it.
It's not, the property owner, if it's a district, there's a public hearing.
right,
Even if it's an individual property, there's a public hearing. But normally, from what I've seen so far with the LPOs that are currently running in New York State, is that the property owner does not have a declination ability for inclusion as an individual property or district for a local preservation
well,
ordinance.
so that's something that we also
So
want to
that's something we
determine
need
as
to-
part of the
we need to
ordinance,
look
whether
at.
the property owner does have the right to refuse a
Yeah.
nomination.
Yeah.
And then the
The
other-
way Crystal explained it in council was that it shouldn't have that. That was one of the questions.
And then the other thing would be, if the property owner is selling the house, does that house remain on the LPO, or does it have to get new approval by the new
Remain on the
owner?
LPO.
So,
And
which
I-
would be
And
good or bad, I don't
Yeah,
know.
well, and I would say with the initial entrance into an LPO, the property owner should have some say. But then going forward, after they market the property, to market the property to a secondary owner or to a new owner, then that owner would know going into the purchase that it is in a LPO and there's certain restrictions. That could, and in many cases, that actually can increase the value of the property instead of decreasing.
Alright, sorry, Ellen, we took.
That's
we-
okay.
we-
That's-
got you off track, go ahead. you can-
That's
go ahead.
okay. I just wanted to qualify some of Tony's
Yes.
questions,
That's good.
about how how that plays out just a little bit. So, the flip side of all of this is what kind of structures do you think the LPO should not protect? And it really just goes down the same road. Any residential structure, any manufacturing, so again, this is all played out again, in terms of whether all the same candidates are viewed as, no, don't protect those structures, they don't need protection.
I'm kind of wondering, just off the top of my head,
Yeah.
manufacturing structures that are currently operating.
That on top of what does make something, I mean, you could buy something and make it a manufacturing structure, technically.
Yeah, I mean-
I mean, until that's defined, it's delegated for machine manufacturing, wood manufacturing, furniture, whatever. I mean, there's a lot of small little details in line with what I think you're going
Yeah.
towards, right?
Which means you make it a
And so
component of
I
zoning.
think we want to protect the history.
You don't want
of our
somebody coming in
community.
and building something that, in a historic building that might not really sit well.
Well, that's
Like
why
putting a dispensary in St. Pete's,
Yeah.
just as an example.
But, you know, that's, never mind. Yeah, I'm still trying to collect my thoughts on it,
So for example, on the flip side, what structures do you think the LPO should not protect? In terms of kind of what you shared about what should be protected, the LPO should not protect any structure less than 100 years old, for example. So if you think that the minimum for eligibility should be 100 years old, then anything less than that should not be included in the LPO. So it's just trying to kind of tease that out to make sure is that what you want?
I would think, I mean, again, I think it's fair too, that, the age of the structure shouldn't be all, you know, well, anything not less than 100 we should roll off. But, no, I mean, I don't think that's as important as, to me, again, the viability of keeping the structure standing. And I keep going back to the arcade building. I mean, it's an eyesore. It's by itself, it's not gonna nothing's gonna happen to it. I don't think anybody's even claimed it. I know the county doesn't want it, the city doesn't want it. I think the owner on record was the woman from Long Island or whatever. It's a derelict.
Dormy.
So, you're gonna protect that? Well, it's an old, it's got it's a beautiful building, what's left of it. But it's an eyesore in the community, it's putting
So,
a drag on the community.
The age of the building is just a point of entry. So everything that follows the age, and we can make the point of entry a different criteria. But typically and historically, the age of a structure has been the point of entry for considering its eligibility as a historic or significant structure. Now, if you want to make the point of entry that a famous person by some measure lived in that house, that's your other point of entry.
Can you
So
apply
one
a
of the
variance
reasons,
to the starting point?
say again?
A variance, like with a code, city code. Okay, we say it's gonna be 100 years with this criteria, what if it's 98?
Right,
Could they apply for a variance to?
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's my question.
yeah. The
You'd like
var-
that,
it,
you know,
it probably wouldn't be a variance specifically, because but it would be something to the
Technically,
equivalent
yeah.
of that, absolutely.
However you word it.
But that also begs the question, should the point of entry be 75 years? So how, you know, in
But
the
it might not
event,
be due to the age, it might be due to the criteria that you
Right.
could apply for the variance.
right,
The
right.
age thing.
So what I'm saying, the only point I'm trying to make is what needs to be decided is what criterion is the point of entry for consideration at all. And one reason the age of a building is typically and historically used as the point of entry for eligibility is because it's very quantifiable. Whereas anything that's more qualitative in nature gets tougher, and so that can come later in the assessment process after it's made its point of entry past 50 years, 75, 100, whatever it is. So it's my recommendation that the point of entry be the age of the building, because a lot of what follows that becomes very qualitative in terms of being able to assess it.
Could you do the age of the building or approval from the historical preservation committee? And then that way it would be up to the committee to, if their building was 70 years old, then they could still
Yeah.
have a means,
Yeah,
if that owner
absolutely.
wanted to, pursue that.
Absolutely.
and be
But
part
you
of
would
that.
still maintain in terms of your
Application.
your application and your procedural things that are in place, the point of entry is
100
is
years
100
old.
years old.
Which is kind of why I said
Yeah.
50, because it coincides with the tax credits could be available
Right.
in historic.
Right,
districts.
50 years old is the point of entry for national
And again, it's
So
status.
now they
It's
still
just
could do
point of
50 with permission from, or approval from,
Yeah.
local preservation committee?
Yeah, they would have to then go into that more qualitative process
Mhm.
to justify the 50-year less than 100 kind of
And
thing.
the
Which,
way-
again, you can create a process for.
And it doesn't mean that, more than a handful of properties would ever,
Right.
go through
Right.
all of the qualifications and actually be approved into a LPO, either individual or as a district.
I would also project that from any time of adoption or approval, it could really take up to 10 years to really see what the full impact of the LPO would have and whether amendments would need to be made to it, in terms of lowering the structure age, whatever it needs to be. So it depends on really how the community responds to it and how the officials put in charge of enforcing it and facilitating it also treat those applications.
Can I just backtrack a little bit?
Yeah.
We've got 7 standalone landmarks, and we got the districts, 3 districts that are
The national.
historical. Yeah,
Yeah, national.
and that's really not an LPO deal, it's just they're designated as historical districts of buildings, which makes them
On
eligible
the national register
on the national
Yeah.
register, and that makes them eligible for potential historic tax
for
credits.
tax credits, yes.
Okay, so right now, as it stands, any of those structures, if I bought the Jamestown Armory from the state because whatever,
Right.
I could tear it down if I
You
wanted.
absolutely
As long as
could.
you're, as long as you're on dime.
As long as it's not, yeah, it's
Yeah.
my own dime.
It is not
exactly.
protected.
So, I'm thinking, so the LPO would designate, and I guess that's my question, that's where I'm getting to. So the LPO goes, the Armory's, it's on the historical register, so we're gonna say anybody who buys that potentially can't tear it. If that's what it comes
Well,
down to?
that's a few steps ahead. So, for example, when and if an LPO is adopted, the next step is forming the board and commission. The LPO is just the enabling legislation for anything else to happen, including what you're talking about. And so one of those things can be, once that enabling legislation is in place, then the city has the legal right to say, hey, everything that's already a national landmark, we want to make a sweeping designation for local designation. Or they could say, nope, every landmark has to go through the same nomination and same application process for itself. So again, that's partly up for the board that's appointed for that, but also how the LPO ends up being written.
So the board says, can't tear down the Armory. I'm the owner, I bought it from the state. The board says I can't do that. Is there an appeals process with that?
Yep.
And then potentially court litigation?
It would be the same thing as a variance process.
Okay.
Yeah, because there are property owners that apply for demolition permits right now that get turned down, not based on historical significance of the property, but for other reasons as well that align with the current city code. But so if they do want to do that, they have to file a variance for that demolition. So the same thing would
So
hold
this
true.
board, this LPO board decided the arcade building should be on the LPO, it should be preserved.
Mhm.
and the building starts to crumble, the
Mhm.
city's forced to tear it down. They have to go back through the LPO and through that process.
No, they'd have to go through the owner. They still have to, they don't have ownership over it, they don't have legal control of the building.
Well, see, the owner decides to tear it down, or wants to because it's a hazard. You guys
She
have
would
liability.
have
She's
to
gotta
apply
do
for a
that.
demolition permit,
Yeah.
and depending on the current status of the building, if it, at the time of her application for a demolition permit, if the arcade building has not been designated a local historic landmark, she can do whatever she wants.
Right.
And if it was designated, then it would have to get
She would,
approval.
yeah.
She would have to get
In terms
approval.
of what the draft is saying, the draft ordinance reads right now, there would be a demolition delay period for review for alternatives, further analysis, both structurally and economically. And then after that time period, another assessment would be made. But you can also eliminate any demolition delay in the ordinance as well. The ordinance can say whatever you want to
Yeah,
say.
you know, footnote that, it's an immediate hazard. That's why I mentioned the city tear
Sure.
it down, because that's usually what happens. You know, they become a public safety issue, and
Sure.
then the city steps in.
You could do an emergency demolition, I mean, let's just say it caught fire, you know,
Right.
you don't need permission.
In fact, they've already done that. Already.
There are certainly intervening events that can thwart a process that's in place otherwise.
Hmm.
All right, go ahead.
Yeah, so we've kind of gone through both sides. And, so what I've got here is restrictions that you would want to include or exclude, and what kind of impacts to the community you hope would, and these are just suggestions, these are just to get your mind thinking about things. And so, for example, should the LPO include a prohibition of demolition, or should it say, yeah, go ahead, tear it down, you don't need our permission, kind of thing. So these are just to provoke the thinking about things. Should it exclude requiring designer materials that are period appropriate, or should it indeed include requirements to use design and materials that are period appropriate? Excuse me. Issues regarding real estate speculators, and that's different from developers. So I want to make that distinction that speculators that have a more of a predatory intent to the community are different from developers that can sometimes be hard to tease out, but we do want to make those distinctions. And then just in terms of what you hope or fear the community impact would be. Increase, decrease in property values, increase, decrease in community cohesion, increase, decrease in crime, and then any other hopes or fears that you might have as well.
I guess my first thought is if the property owner has a say in whether or not they are part of the LPO, that sort of drives my thought process for this topic. Because if they have a say and they signed up for all this, then, I'm good. They understood what they were signing up for, they agreed to it, and they want to be part of it.
When does that become a deterrent for the person, as you brought up earlier, if they wanna resell their home? And myself, I'm not agreeing to that.
Well, as the buyer, you might not agree.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah,
And
as
you
the
have the
seller.
opportunity not to buy it.
Right, yeah, that's true.
When does that become a deterrent?
Like, what
You
would
know
the
what I'm saying?
secondary effects of that be to the
Right.
seller and to
I mean, when you
potential
look at
buyers?
that,
But at least I'm on board with them, the current property owner signing up for it. If they can't sell it because of this, then they still made that decision. It wasn't made for them.
Right. So the other question that accompanies that is, what kinds of things would you include or exclude from the LPO despite your fears? And that's just an open-ended question, so it's, because, the fears of any particular impact on the community, in some way they're unknowable. We can't necessarily predict every single scenario and every single outcome for any respective property. So in terms of what you would include or exclude despite your fears of an adverse impact. Just noodle on that.
Just things keep popping in my head.
Sure.
There was you guys pursued the code for charging property owners, I guess yearly for keeping them, leaving the building vacant. I don't know whether that's been implemented yet or not, I remember I was talking about quite a bit.
Joe, do you know if that was adopted?
I don't believe it was, not to my knowledge.
We're talking-
I don't remember voting on it, let's leave it at that.
Cause I was trying to, in my head, trying to visualize, and again, because you got on here, let's prohibit speculators and sort of like that, and there seems to be quite a few of them around here. How, if that was in place, that would maybe kind of discourage the speculation part of it, and then if the LPO had that, you're kind of duplicating things. There's a lot to sort out.
There is.
There really is. So I don't know how you wanna approach, you're getting input from us.
Yeah.
Maybe another, pull together something else and go back through it again, because we have to really refine this.
I mean, the goal isn't to necessarily walk away with any answers today, it's just to get that conversation going and identify themes in terms of what our priorities are or are not, and being able to implement those priorities as part of the ordinance.
Yeah.
And I guess part of my fear, and it's probably an unfounded fear, but gentrification of a neighborhood. Because of, say the preservation ordinance in the committee decide that the whole block is gonna be designated as an LPO. And not only, the residents currently in that area agree to it, but they don't understand it, and they don't have the means to be able to do
Age-wise or other.
age-wise or
monetary,
otherwise,
right.
or socioeconomic. That may force them out of the neighborhood. So I think we have to be careful, when we craft the additional criteria that go into this, that we avoid the implication of gentrification.
Yeah, there's further protections to
Yeah.
think about including.
I remember with my building, when I started it, people were talking about, historic tax credits, but I never made enough money to make it worthwhile.
Yeah.
Because,
Those are the larger projects.
yeah,
we're able to
and
do
so
that.
it's really that historical tax credits, in fact, I had quote investors all of a sudden show up when I drove from Buffalo, and I was very like, wow. So some of these things, if you really look at them, there's an imbalance to it. Like I'm trying to ping off what you were talking about, the gentrification issues. So I have my cute little home, in a nice neighborhood, and yeah, it's been designated LPO, whatever. And so I'm eligible for tax credits, which I really can't use for the amount of money.
Not with the LPO, just with national.
Yeah, with the national
Yeah.
thing. But, then all of a sudden that opens up that possibility of some big developers coming in, because that's worth it.
That's where they make their money. There is one thing that I do wanna mention though, that could be utilized as an incentive in an LPO if this was done in conjunction with establishment of the LPO. New York State Real Property Tax Law, 444A, which is designed to allow for certain exemptions of properties that are improved within a local preservation district or individual LPO. That's something the city has never taken a look at. It had always shied away from it. It's been on the state books for decades. But that allows for for improvement of the property. And let's say you have a building downtown and it's included as a individual LPO. And the tax exemption, is in place. That would allow you, years 1 through 5, an exemption of 100% of the increase in the value due to the improvements that you make in the building. And in year 6, it goes down to 80%, 60%, and then down through year 10, you're back to a full assessment.
Yeah, that's.
Now that may make it worthwhile for you to invest $250,000 in your building, if you're gonna be able to get that exemption. And from the city's aspect, it doesn't hurt the city at all, other than delaying gratification.
Their cash flow is the same.
Cash flow is the same for the first 5 years, and then the cash flow begins to increase.
Yes.
And at the same time, the neighborhood is improved because that one structure has invested in it and gotten that exemption. The city did that, you know, to try to spur single-family home development, you know, with a 10-year exemption for real property taxes. Country View established that. So it is something, and I would encourage city council to take a look at the possibility, if we go further with this, that hand in hand with that, so it's not just punitive, it's carrot and stick. Okay, you know, you want your building to be, you know, individually designated? Well, here's what we can do to help you along the way to make sure that it's maintained, or to bring it back to what it should be period-wise.
Yeah.
That's a really good idea.
And if that was incorporated into this LPO process, or how that goes. Yeah.
But, you know, a lot of communities have done that. I would have to take a look, because I see that, you know, on some of them, they indicate that the building or property must have been vacant for 2 years. You know, prior, for the exemption to take effect. So, and we would have to take a look at that, you know, as we go forward. But, I guess my recommendation, for what it's worth, would be if the city council or planning commission or somebody would be willing to appoint a small work group that could meet and kind of hash out some of these items, bring it back to council, bring it back to.
Yeah.
Pardon?
I said, we're right here.
Yeah, but, you know, we're limited on time, we're limited, you know, by other duties that we have. You know, it could be, you know, could be Pete, working with, you know, maybe Ellen, working with a representative from city council, a representative from planning commission. And I'm not saying to avoid, you know, any open meetings law, but, you know, but to meet, you know, and to be able to structure these in a form and fashion that can be brought back to commission, to council, in a format that you know, that you know, everybody can take a review at and say, no, this is garbage, you know, send it back, and, you know.
Good things to think about, absolutely. I do want to be mindful of our time.
We need to come up with a good starting point and set a special meeting for the front end of this.
Yeah. And we might be able to do it on the back end of Gateway Law.
Sure.
Yeah.
We're all gonna get together and we can talk about this again.
Yeah.
Is this something Corporation Council would take some of our thoughts and put them into the draft for what we just did
I
here
can
today?
put them into the draft.
You can put them into the draft?
I can,
Alright.
yeah.
And then also double check on if the property owner, has any choice.
Well, that's up to us.
It is, well, I guess we remove that from the draft, or make sure that it's worded
It's in the
correctly in
Right.
there. Yeah, make sure it's in the draft.
Yeah.
Okay.
But otherwise, I would say work session number 1
Yes.
is in the books.
Okay. And is everyone available, in 2 to 3 weeks for a special meeting?
Tuesdays aren't good for me, just so you know. I'm just, you know.
Is there any day that works best? I mean, I'm flexible.
I can do Mondays before council, that works good. Tuesdays is tough.
So
But any day-
Mondays,
Anything other than that for a special meeting,
so just no Tuesdays?
preferably.
Okay, no Tuesdays. Is that okay? Can we do
Ellen,
a
just a point
non-Tuesday?
of clarification.
Yes.
You said work session 1 is in the books, does that mean you're coming to the first work session in March?
No, this is our work session, so
Okay,
our
okay.
planning commission work session
Okay.
is
got it.
done, check.
Okay.
Thank you.
Put a pin in that to be picked up at a later date, yeah.
That was helpful.
Good, thank you for your time, you guys.
That was very good. All right. Is there anything else to come before the commission?
We don't have a date for the special meeting yet.
No, we wanted to wait until after, city staff has a chance to review everything and make any adjustments and they feel should be included.
What was that deadline on the Gateway project?
March
that they-
31.
So basically every 6 weeks, 5 weeks.
And if it has to go to county planning, it has to be coordinated with their meeting dates, so I'm not sure. When did they meet, Ellen?
The county?
County planning.
I have no idea.
So it'd have to be coordinated with their meeting, hopefully get it in, you know, and they require full site plan and seeker. So those items have to be
We don't wanna
completed.
push it back another year for them monetarily.
No, I know, I'm trying to figure out, you know, time-wise, how we can get this thing spurred along so that we don't delay them another year.
Right.
And all we can do is, if they're ready to meet, we can meet. We just have to make sure that city staff is in recommendation of that.
Right.
So that we're not gonna be fighting amongst each other. Okay.
And
that's
have
it.
have a conference.
Yeah, yes, we'll have a
Hopefully
space
all
available.
contracts will be settled.
It's okay. Otherwise, we'll be in the lobby. All right.
Don't forget this, I don't know, are you gonna keep this?
Yeah, I'll take that, yep.
Okay. Our meeting is adjourned. Thank you.